What would you do if your entire life was shaped by someone else's pride? I was 20 when my father's fear of shame turned my future into a transaction. He said it was for my own good, but deep down, I knew. I was being sold, not saved. Before continuing, please subscribe and tell me where you're watching this story from, because what I'm about to tell you is still unbelievable. I was born in a small wooden house on the edge of Maple Hollow, Georgia, in 1946. My father, Samuel Carter, worked long days tending someone else's land, while my mother, Martha, earned a few coins sewing for neighbors. We weren't starving, but every meal felt like it might be our last. "This girl's got fire in her eyes," the midwife said when I was born. She was wrong. That fire didn't last long under my father's rules. I was the youngest of 6, 5 brothers and me. You'd think that meant I was the protected one, but in our home, boys were raised to see the world, and girls were raised to stay hidden from it, while my brothers roamed the fields, climbed trees, and played ball in town. I stayed inside learning to cook, clean, and sew, because that's what good girls did. "Evelyn," my father would say, "a girl's place is inside. You don't need the world. You just need a husband." But even at 5, I knew something in that didn't feel right. Once when I ran outside to join my brothers, he caught me. "Do you want people talking?" he barked. "A girl who plays outside gets lost." Lost. That word haunted me for years. To him, being lost meant being ruined. To me, it meant being free. By the time I turned 10, my world had already shrunk to the size of our kitchen walls. "If you go anywhere," my father said, "you go with your mother or one of your brothers." I nodded, even though it felt like my wings were being clipped before they could ever grow. At 12, I begged my mother, "Mama, can I go play with the girls in the square?" She gave me that sad, quiet smile. "You know your daddy won't allow it." "But they're just playing," her voice broke. "Your father says a girl who plays in the street forgets who she is." And that's how I learned obedience, not because I believed in it, but because fear taught me it was safer to stay silent. At 14, my father pulled me out of school. "Books don't raise families," he said. "You'll learn what matters." What mattered, apparently, was sewing straight lines and knowing how to serve a husband I hadn't even met. But there was one person who saw something different in me. Mrs. Turner, the town librarian. She would slip me books when my father wasn't around. "Your mind is your freedom, Evelyn," she whispered once, placing a worn copy of Jane Eyre in my hands. "Don't let anyone lock that away." Those words burned into my heart. I read by candlelight every night, devouring every story that spoke of courage, love, and escape. For a few pages at a time, I was somewhere else, anywhere but Maple Hollow. Tell me, if you grew up being told that obedience was safety, would you have dared to question it? By 16, I knew my life wasn't really mine. I was living in a quiet prison built by my father's pride and my mother's silence. My brothers barely noticed. They were free men in a world that belonged to them. But I was being raised for a future chosen by someone else. And then, on the summer I turned 17, that future started closing in. The drought came. Money ran dry. My father's pride began to crack. And when pride breaks, it demands a sacrifice. I just didn't know yet that the sacrifice would be me. The night my father called me into the kitchen, I thought I was in trouble for reading again. I had no idea that conversation would end my childhood. Forever. Don't miss the next part, where Samuel Carter makes a decision that will shatter his daughter's world. When my father called me into the kitchen that evening, the house felt colder than usual. The air smelled of rain-soaked wood and silence. My mother sat at the table, wringing a handkerchief between her fingers. My father's Bible lay open beside his plate, though he wasn't reading it. He just stared at it, jaw tight, eyes heavy. "Sit down, Evelyn," he said, his voice low. I sat. The wooden chair creaked under me like it was warning me to run. He cleared his throat. You're nearly 18 now. It's time we thought about your future." My heart dropped. Whenever my father spoke of my future, it wasn't really about me. Martha opened her mouth. "Samuel." But he raised his hand. "I've made up my mind." I looked between them. "What are you talking about?" He hesitated for a second, then said, "A man from town has expressed interest in marrying you. A respectable man. He's steady, owns his land, and can provide for you." I felt my stomach twist. "Who?" "Edward Hale," he said finally, not meeting my eyes. For a moment, the name didn't register. Then it hit me. "Mr. Hale? The one who lives near the ridge?" He nodded. Edward Hale was older than my father. Quiet, reclusive, and rumored to be a widower. People said strange things about him, that his first wife had died suddenly, that no one ever saw him smile. "Daddy," my voice trembled. "He's old enough to be my grandfather." My father's eyes hardened. "He's a good man, Evelyn. He's offering you security. That's more than most girls get." "What did he offer?" I whispered, though I already feared the answer. My father's jaw flexed. "Enough to pay off the land and get us through winter." I stared at him, feeling the world tilt. "You're trading me for money?" He slammed his hand on the table, rattling the Bible. "Watch your tongue! I'm doing what's best for this family." "What's best for you?" I said before I could stop myself. My mother's gasp cut through the air. "Evelyn, please!" But I couldn't stop. The words were spilling out like the truth I'd buried for years. "You always said a girl's worth comes from her obedience, but what about my life? My dreams?" He stood, pointing toward the door. "Enough! You'll marry Edward Hale, and you'll thank me one day when you're living comfortable instead of starving." Tears burned my eyes. "Comfortable isn't the same as happy, Daddy." He didn't answer. He just walked out, his boots heavy on the old floorboards. Mama stayed quiet. After a long moment, she reached across the table, taking my shaking hands in hers. Her eyes were red. "He's doing what he thinks is right," she said softly. "Then why does it feel so wrong?" I whispered. She pressed her lips together. "Because sometimes love gets twisted by fear. Tell me, if you were me, 17, scared with nowhere to go, would you have fought harder, or would you have done what I did?" Stayed silent? That night I sat by my window, watching the rain fall on the fields. I thought about all the books Mrs. Turner had given me. In every story, the heroine had a choice: to run, to fight, to love. But my story wasn't a book. It was a sentence I hadn't written. The next morning, word spread through town. People whispered as I passed. "Evelyn Carter's marrying Edward Hale," they said, like it was a miracle. "She's lucky. Lucky." That word felt like a curse. In the days that followed, preparations began. Mama started sewing a white dress out of the finest fabric Edward had sent. My brothers avoided me, pretending it wasn't happening. The house filled with quiet, suffocating anticipation. When Edward came by to formally ask for my hand, he removed his hat politely. His gray eyes studied me like he was looking for something long lost. "Miss Carter," he said gently, "I promise you'll be safe under my roof. Safe, not loved, not free, just safe." I smiled weakly and said nothing. I thought being sold to a stranger was the end of my freedom. But it was only the beginning of a story darker than I could ever imagine. Don't miss the next part, where I meet Edward Hale for the first time and learn the unsettling reason he chose me. The morning Edward Hale came to finalize the wedding, the air outside felt heavier than rain. The clouds hung low over Maple Hollow, pressing on the roof like they too were carrying a secret. My father stood by the porch in his cleanest shirt, chest puffed with false pride. My mother had been up since dawn, baking bread no one would eat. And me? I sat by the window wishing time could just stop. The black truck rolled into our yard around 9. Its engine sputtered to silence, and then Edward stepped out. He was taller than I remembered, dressed in a gray coat that looked too fine for this town. His silver hair was neatly combed, his face calm but unreadable. There was a quiet authority in the way he moved. A man used to getting what he wanted without ever needing to raise his voice. "Mr. Carter." He greeted my father, shaking his hand firmly. "Mrs. Carter." Then his eyes found mine. "Miss Evelyn." I stood slowly, forcing my hands to stay still. "Mr. Hale," I said softly. He smiled, polite, almost gentle. But something about it chilled me. It wasn't the smile of a man meeting his bride. It was the smile of someone confirming a decision already made. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside lay a gold band, simple but heavy, its shine far too bright for my life. "It belonged to my mother," he said. "It's only right you have it." "Thank you," I murmured, though the words scraped my throat. Mama's eyes glistened, but not with joy. My father stood taller, his expression proud. "She'll make a fine wife, Mr. Hale. Strong-willed, but she'll learn." That sentence cut deeper than any knife. "She'll learn," as if love were something to be taught through silence. Edward nodded. "I believe so." He stayed for tea, speaking mostly with my father. I kept quiet, answering only when spoken to, but every so often, I caught Edward studying me. Not cruelly, just curiously, like he was trying to read a book whose language he'd forgotten. When he finally left, the sound of his truck fading down the dirt road, I turned to Mama. "Do you trust him?" She hesitated. "He seems decent, Evelyn. That's more than most get." "But he doesn't smile," I whispered. "Not really." Her hands trembled as she folded the handkerchief in her lap. Some men smile with their actions, not their faces. "Tell me, would you believe that if you were me? Would you find comfort in someone's silence?" The days that followed blurred together. The town buzzed with gossip. "Edward Hale's marrying young Evelyn Carter," they said at the store and the church. Some called it generous. Others whispered about his first wife who had fallen ill and died the year before. No one dared ask questions. The morning of the wedding rehearsal, Mrs. Turner, the librarian, found me sitting alone under the old oak near the square. "Child," she said softly, "you don't look ready for marriage. You look trapped." "I don't have a choice," I replied. "There's always a choice," she said, placing her worn hand on mine. "It's just that some choices demand more courage than others." Her words stayed with me that night as Mama fitted the dress one last time. The satin shimmered under lamplight, but to me, it looked like a shroud. When dawn came, I didn't sleep. I stared at the mirror, trying to recognize the woman staring back. She looked calm, but she wasn't me. She was the version of me my father had built. At the ceremony, the preacher's voice echoed through the small chapel. My heart raced so loud I could barely hear him. "Do you, Evelyn Carter, take Edward Hale to be your lawful husband?" I looked at Edward. His expression didn't change. Then my father's hand tightened around mine. "I do." And just like that, my fate was sealed. With 2 words and no breath left to fight. I thought the hardest part was saying, "I do." But I was wrong. The hardest part was the night that followed, when Edward finally told me why he married me. Don't miss the next part, where I uncover the unsettling truth about my new husband and the house I was never meant to enter. The drive to Edward's estate felt endless. The truck rattled over the dirt road, its tires humming like a warning I couldn't yet understand. I sat beside him in silence, the white of my wedding dress fading into gray dust. He didn't speak much, just small talk about the weather, the land, the crops. His voice was calm, measured and distant, like he'd spent years perfecting how not to be heard. When the truck finally stopped, I stared out the window, my breath catching in my throat. His house stood on a hill surrounded by dying oaks. It wasn't falling apart, but it wasn't alive either. The shutters were closed, the paint fading, the windows dark. It looked like a house that remembered too much. "This will be your home now," Edward said quietly, stepping out and opening my door. I followed him up the porch steps, my heart pounding. The door creaked open to a wide hall lined with portraits. Faces of people long gone, all staring down at me as if they were judging Edward's choice. A woman appeared from the shadows of the hallway. A thin, grey-haired lady in a black dress and lace collar. "Mr. Hale?" she said softly. "Welcome home." "This is Mrs. Whitmore," Edward said, turning to me. "She's kept the house for many years." Mrs. Whitmore gave a tight smile. "Dinner's ready, sir." Her eyes flicked to me briefly. Curious, maybe even pitying. It made my skin prickle. At dinner, the table stretched longer than seemed necessary. Edward sat at the head, I at the other end. The silence between us was thick. He asked if I liked the roast. I said yes. He nodded once. That was it. When the meal ended, he rose and said, "You must be tired. Mrs. Whitmore will show you to your room." Your room, not our room. As I followed the old woman up the staircase, I caught sight of a portrait on the landing. A woman with dark hair and haunting blue eyes, her smile faint but warm. "Who's that?" I asked. Mrs. Whitmore hesitated. "That was Mrs. Hale, Edward's late wife." "She was beautiful," I whispered. "She was," the woman replied softly, before continuing up the stairs. My room was at the far end of the hall, large but bare. The bed was made neatly, a vase of dried flowers on the nightstand. It smelled faintly of lavender and dust. "Mr. Hale prefers quiet evenings," Mrs. Whitmore said as she set down my suitcase. "Breakfast is at 7. When she left, I sat on the bed and stared at the cracked wallpaper. The silence in that house wasn't peaceful. It was the kind that listens. Hours later, a soft knock came at my door. "Evelyn," Edward's voice said. "Yes?" He opened the door halfway. The lamplight caught the edge of his face, calm but unreadable. "I know this isn't what you wanted," he said. "I don't expect you to understand me yet, but I married you for a reason. A good one." My voice shook. "Then tell me." He looked at the floor for a long time before saying, "Because you remind me of someone I lost." I froze. "Your wife?" He nodded. "You have her eyes." I didn't know what to say. Grief had brought me here. Someone else's grief, not mine. He stepped back, his tone soft but final. "You can rest now. Good night, Evelyn." The door closed gently. I sat in silence, heart racing, questions swirling. What did it mean to remind him of her? Was I living in her shadow or replacing it? "Tell me, if you were me, would that confession comfort you or terrify you?" The wind howled outside, rattling the shutters like someone trying to get in. I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing her face in that portrait. Those eyes watching me, as if warning me to run while I still could. And then I heard it. A faint creak in the hallway. Slow footsteps moving toward my door. When I opened my eyes, the door handle turned. Someone, or something, was standing on the other side. Don't miss the next part, where I discover the secret room in Edward's house and what he's been hiding since his wife's death. The door handle stopped turning. For a moment, I thought I had imagined it. The old house creaked with every gust of wind, but this sound was different. Too deliberate, too human. I sat up, holding my breath, waiting. Then came a whisper of footsteps fading down the hall. When I finally gathered the courage to move, I tiptoed to the door and pressed my ear against it. Nothing. Just the steady tick of the grandfather clock downstairs. I wanted to believe it was Mrs. Whitmore checking on me. But something told me she wouldn't dare walk the halls at night. The next morning, I asked her over breakfast, "Did you pass by my room last night?" Her spoon froze midway to her mouth. "No, dear, why?" "I thought I heard someone." Her eyes flicked briefly toward the staircase, then back to me. "This house makes noises. Old wood, old memories. Don't pay them any mind." Her tone was kind, but the look in her eyes said something else. Fear. When Edward joined us, he seemed distant, distracted. His gaze lingered on the window as if the horizon held answers he couldn't reach. You slept well, I hope." "Yes," I lied. He nodded, folding his napkin carefully. "Good. I'll be in the study most of the day. Feel free to walk the grounds, but stay away from the West Wing. The floorboards there are weak." The West Wing. That word caught in my mind like a thorn. I nodded politely, but a part of me, the curious part that used to sneak books from Mrs. Turner's library, wanted to know why he warned me about that specific part of the house. After lunch, when Edward disappeared into his study, I wandered upstairs. The long hallways stretched in quiet symmetry, portraits staring down like watchful sentinels. I stopped at the landing, facing the portrait of his late wife again. Her painted eyes seemed almost alive in the light, following me wherever I moved. I whispered to the painting, "What happened to you?" The silence that followed was heavy. "Tell me, if you were in my place, would you have turned back? Or would you have followed that silence like I did?" The West Wing began just beyond a narrow corridor, half covered by a dusty curtain. I slipped behind it, my heart pounding. The air smelled different there. Stale, heavy, untouched by years of sunlight. Most of the doors were locked, except one. Its brass knob turned easily, revealing a room frozen in time. The air was colder there, as if the house itself held its breath. It was a bedroom. Faded wallpaper, wilted flowers in a vase, and a vanity covered in dust. But what struck me most was the dress laid across the bed. A pale blue gown, delicate and perfectly preserved, as if waiting for someone to return. My hand trembled as I touched the fabric. The lace was soft but brittle, falling apart at the edges. Beside it lay an old photograph. Edward and his first wife, standing in front of the same house. Her smile was radiant. His, not so much. I turned the photo over. Scrawled in delicate handwriting were 3 words. "For our forever." A shiver ran through me. Suddenly, footsteps echoed down the hall. Slow, heavy, getting closer. I panicked, setting the photo back down and rushing behind the curtain by the window. The door creaked open. Edward stepped inside. He stood there silent, his eyes fixed on the bed. His hand brushed the blue dress softly, like he was touching a ghost. "Forgive me," he whispered. Then he turned and left, closing the door quietly behind him. I stood frozen, my heart pounding so loud I could barely breathe. Forgive him for what? For losing her, or for something far worse? When I returned to my room, the house felt smaller, darker, alive with secrets I didn't want to uncover but couldn't ignore. That night, I dreamt of the woman in the portrait. Her face pale, her lips moving soundlessly. I woke with her name on my tongue, but no memory of ever hearing it before. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. No name, no signature. Just 3 words written in a shaky hand. Don't trust him. Don't miss the next part, where I discover who left the note and uncover the first clue about what really happened to Edward Hale's wife. The note lay on the floor like a whisper that had escaped someone's trembling hand. 3 words, written in hurried ink. Don't trust him. My pulse quickened. The handwriting was shaky, uneven, like someone had written it in the dark. I looked toward the door, half expecting to see movement under the crack. But the hallway outside was empty. Who could have left it? Mrs. Whitmore? One of the servants I'd never seen? Or could it have been Edward himself warning me in some twisted way? At breakfast, I tried to read his face. Edward sat across from me, calm as ever, sipping his coffee while reading the newspaper. His expression gave away nothing. "You're quiet this morning," he said, not looking up. "I didn't sleep much," I replied. "This house, it makes strange sounds." He gave a faint smile. "Old homes have long memories, Evelyn. They talk to you when the world is silent." His words lingered in the air like smoke. Later that afternoon, when Edward left to visit the nearby mill, I slipped into the kitchen where Mrs. Whitmore was cleaning silverware. "Mrs. Whitmore," I asked carefully, "have you ever seen anyone else in the house? Anyone besides you and Mr. Hale?" She paused. "Why do you ask?" "I found a note under my door this morning. Someone warning me not to trust him." Her face went pale. The silver spoon slipped from her hand, clattering onto the floor. "You mustn't mention that again," she whispered quickly, glancing toward the hallway. "Why not? You know something, don't you?" Her hands trembled as she gathered the spoons. "I've worked here for years, child. I've seen things best left unspoken. The master isn't cruel, but he's haunted." "Haunted?" I repeated, "by guilt," she said softly, "and by what this house remembers." Before I could ask more, the sound of tires crunching on gravel echoed outside. Edward had returned early. Mrs. Whitmore pressed a finger to her lips and hurried out of the kitchen, leaving me alone with more questions than answers. "Tell me, if you found a warning like that, would you confront him? Or would you pretend not to know, like I did?" That night, as rain lashed against the windows, I sat at my vanity holding the note. The ink had smudged from where my fingers traced it too many times. Don't trust him. I needed to know who had written it. So, after midnight, when the house went still, I lit a small lamp and slipped quietly into the hallway. The old floorboards groaned beneath my bare feet. The portraits seemed to watch as I passed, their painted eyes reflecting the flicker of the flame. I started toward the west wing again, the place Edward warned me to avoid. A draft whispered through the cracks of the old walls, carrying faint echoes. A creak, a sigh, a soft rhythmic sound, like someone rocking in a chair. When I reached the blue room, the one that had belonged to his first wife, the door was slightly ajar. My lamp trembled in my hand. I pushed it open slowly. The room looked the same as before, still untouched. But this time there was something new. On the vanity lay a fresh rose, perfectly red and alive, in a vase that hadn't held water in years. I froze. Someone had been here recently. Behind me, the floor creaked. I turned sharply, heart racing. "Who's there?" I whispered. No answer, just silence. I stepped backward and bumped into something solid. A hand grabbed my shoulder. "Evelyn." Edward's voice said softly behind me. I spun around, nearly dropping the lamp. His expression was calm but shadowed. "What are you doing here?" "I heard something," I said quickly. "I thought someone was in the house." His eyes darted to the rose. For a split second, his mask cracked. Fear, or maybe sorrow, flashed across his face. "You shouldn't be in this room," he said quietly. "It's not meant for you." "Then who is it meant for?" I asked, my voice shaking. He didn't answer. He just took the lamp from my hand, blew out the flame, and said, "Go back to your room, please." As I lay awake that night, I couldn't stop wondering, who had left the rose? And why did Edward look so afraid of a dead woman's room? Don't miss the next part, where a midnight scream shatters the silence, and I finally learn the name of the woman who came before me. Sleep wouldn't come that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the rose in that dusty room, vibrant and red against the gray of forgotten years. Who had placed it there? And why did Edward's face look so haunted when he saw it? The storm outside had quieted, but inside the house, the silence was alive. Every creak, every sigh of the old wood felt like a whisper trying to reach me. I lay staring at the ceiling until sometime after midnight, when I heard it. A scream. It tore through the halls like a blade, sharp and desperate. A woman's scream. I jumped out of bed, heart pounding. The house was pitch black, except for the faint glow of lightning through the windows. I grabbed my lamp and rushed to the hall. The air smelled of old dust and candle smoke. "Mrs. Whitmore?" I called. No answer. The scream had come from the west wing, the place I was never supposed to go. My hands shook as I pushed open the heavy door. The hallway beyond felt colder, like the air itself recoiled from the noise. I followed the sound to the blue room, the one that had belonged to Edward's late wife. The door stood wide open now, the rose from the night before gone. My breath caught when I saw it. Something carved into the vanity mirror. Just one word, written in the fog of condensation. "Help," I froze. "Who's there?" I whispered. No answer. Only the slow drip of rain from a crack in the window pane. "Tell me honestly, if you saw that, would you run? Or would you do what I did and take a step closer?" Suddenly, Footsteps thundered behind me. I turned, startled, as Edward appeared in the doorway, his face pale and drenched from the rain. "Evelyn, what are you doing here?" "I heard a scream," I said. "It sounded like—" There was no scream. He cut me off sharply. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled. "You were dreaming." "I wasn't dreaming. There was something here, look." I pointed at the mirror, but when I turned back, the word had vanished. The glass was clean, clear, and empty. Edward's expression softened, pity mixed with frustration. "You're tired," he said. "This house is old. It plays tricks on you. Please go back to your room." He reached for me, but I pulled away. "Why won't you tell me the truth?" I demanded. "What happened to her, Edward? What really happened to your wife?" His eyes darkened. "Enough!" That one word held centuries of command. I could feel my pulse racing in my throat as he whispered, almost pleading. "Don't go looking for ghosts where there are none, Evelyn. Promise me." "I can't promise what I don't believe," I said quietly. For a moment he looked at me. Not as a husband looks at his wife, but as a man looks at someone standing too close to his secrets. Then he turned and walked out, leaving the door wide open behind him. The silence that followed was worse than any scream. I returned to my room, locking the door for the first time. But even there the house didn't let me rest. The wind rattled the shutters, the floorboards creaked, and once, just once, I thought I heard a faint voice whisper my name. "Evelyn." I froze, my lamp flickering. "Who's there?" A shadow crossed the floor beneath the door. Then, silence. When morning came, I found Mrs. Whitmore waiting in the hallway. Her eyes were swollen, her face pale. She looked as though she hadn't slept either. "I heard it too," she said softly. My blood ran cold. "The scream?" She nodded. "You're not imagining things. And you're not the first woman in this house to hear her." That was the moment I realized I wasn't just living with a haunted man. I was living with his ghost. Don't miss the next part, where I learned the name of the woman who came before me, and the terrible truth about how she died. Mrs. Whitmore's words echoed through me long after she'd spoken them. "You're not the first woman in this house to hear her." Her tone was so certain, so heavy with something unspoken, that it made my skin prickle. "Who?" I whispered. "Whose voice did you hear?" The old woman hesitated, glancing down the hall as if afraid someone might be listening. "Her name was Clara Hale," she said finally. "Mr. Hale's first wife." I felt the air leave my lungs. "The woman in the portrait," she nodded. "She was kind, quiet, and gentle. Everyone in town adored her. But one night, she vanished. Mr. Hale told the sheriff she drowned in the lake behind the estate. They never found her body? Vanished." I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. Mrs. Whitmore lowered her voice. "I heard her scream that night just as you did. And ever since then, the house hasn't been the same. Sometimes I hear footsteps in the west wing when no one's there. Sometimes her perfume lingers in the halls." I shivered. "And Mr. Hale?" Her gaze darkened. "He never speaks of her. Not once in 15 years. Before I could ask more, Edward's voice echoed from the bottom of the staircase. "Evelyn?" Mrs. Whitmore straightened immediately, her expression snapping back to its calm mask. "Not a word to him," she whispered sharply. Then louder, "Coming, sir." I nodded, heart pounding. At breakfast, Edward seemed different, distracted, on edge. He pushed his plate aside, barely touching the food. "You look tired," he said. "I heard something again last night," I admitted carefully. "A scream!" His eyes flicked up sharply. "We've discussed this." "But Mrs. Whitmore heard it too," I said. "She told me about your wife, about Clara." The cup in his hand froze halfway to his lips. For a long moment he didn't move. Then he set it down gently, too gently. "Mrs. Whitmore is an old woman," he said, his voice cold and steady. "Her mind plays tricks. Don't let her fill your head with nonsense." "Is it nonsense?" I asked quietly. His eyes met mine. You shouldn't speak of Clara again. Tell me, if someone warned you like that, would you listen? Or would you dig deeper like I did, no matter the cost? That afternoon, Edward left to meet a lawyer in town. The moment his truck disappeared down the road, I turned to Mrs. Whitmore. You have to show me where it happened, I said. Her hands shook as she wiped them on her apron. Child, don't do this to yourself. I have to know the truth. After a long silence, she nodded. Then follow me. We crossed the back fields until we reached the lake, a gray expanse of still water surrounded by weeping willows. The surface reflected the pale sky like a sheet of glass. She went missing right there, Mrs. Whitmore said, pointing to a half-rotted dock. Mr. Hale said she went out for a walk and never came back. And no one questioned it? They did, she said softly. But Edward was respected, wealthy, and grief made people look away. The wind picked up, stirring the reeds. I knelt by the edge, staring into the dark water. For a moment I thought I saw a flicker, a pale shape, like a face just below the surface. I blinked and it was gone. My pulse raced. Do you ever feel like she's still here? I asked. Mrs. Whitmore's eyes filled with tears. Sometimes I feel like she never left. On the walk back, I couldn't stop thinking about the note, the rose, the mirror. And now this lake. Each piece was leading somewhere I wasn't ready to go, but couldn't turn away from. That night, Edward came home late. His clothes were damp, his hands dirty with soil. Working in the garden, he said when I asked. But I didn't see any mud near the flower beds the next morning. The next evening I followed him, and what I saw by the lake made me realize Clara Hale's story wasn't finished. It was repeating itself. Don't miss the next part, where I uncover what Edward's been doing at midnight and find the secret buried beneath the willow trees. The moon hung low over Maple Hollow, bathing the lake in pale silver light. From my bedroom window I could see Edward walking across the field, his lantern bobbing like a restless ghost. It was nearly midnight, too late for anyone to be working. He moved with purpose, careful and quiet, until he reached the willows near the water. There he stopped, set the lantern down, and knelt. I couldn't see what he was doing, only that he stayed there a long time, his head bowed like he was praying. A chill ran through me. He wasn't praying, he was digging. The next morning I asked him casually over breakfast, "Were you out last night?" He looked up slowly, eyes steady. "You must have been dreaming again." "I saw your lantern," I said softly. His spoon clinked against the bowl. I couldn't sleep. The garden needed work, but I'd already checked the garden. There were no fresh holes, no disturbed soil. He was lying. Tell me, what would you have done? Confront him and risk the truth? Or pretend not to see the monster that might be living under your roof? That afternoon, while Edward rode into town, I went to the lake. The ground beneath the willows was soft and uneven, patches of earth freshly turned. My heart pounded as I knelt and brushed my fingers over the damp soil. And then I saw it, something glinting faintly in the mud. I dug carefully until my fingers wrapped around a small silver locket, tarnished and cracked. Inside was a photograph of Edward and a woman, Clara Hale. Her face was serene, her smile frozen in time. But there was something else. On the back of the locket, etched faintly, were the same words I'd seen before in her room. For our forever. My breath caught. Why was her locket buried here? If she'd drowned in the lake, I slipped it into my pocket and hurried back before Edward returned. Every step toward the house felt heavier, as if the air itself wanted to keep me from what I was about to discover. That evening he came home later than usual. His clothes smelled faintly of smoke. I asked where he'd been, and he said, "Clearing branches." But I saw the dark streak on his sleeve. Mud, the same kind that clung to my boots from the lake. After dinner, He poured himself a drink and sat by the fire. "Evelyn," he said softly, "do you believe some people are meant to be haunted?" I froze. "Why do you ask?" He stared into the flames. "Because I am. Every day." There was a sadness in his voice that almost sounded human. Almost. "What haunts you?" I asked carefully. He smiled faintly, eyes distant. Memories. Then he looked at me in a way that made my blood run cold. "You remind me of her more and more each day." I forced a small smile, trying to steady my voice. "You told me that before." "Yes," he said, "but I didn't tell you how dangerous that can be." Before I could respond, a loud crash echoed upstairs, like a door slamming open. Edward's head snapped up. "Stay here," he ordered, grabbing the lantern. But I didn't stay. I followed. The noise came from the west wing. As I reached the top of the stairs, I saw the blue room door wide open, the curtains blowing wildly though the window was shut. Edward stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the vanity. "Clara," he whispered. I stepped closer. "Edward, what is it?" He turned, his face pale. "Go back to your room." "What did you see?" "Nothing," he snapped, then softened instantly, like a man arguing with himself. "It's just this house. It makes me remember." I looked past him, and my breath caught. The locket I had taken was lying on the vanity, clean, polished, restored. That was when I realized whatever haunted this house wasn't trapped in the past. It was still here, and it wanted me to see it. Don't miss the next part, where I uncover the secret Edward buried beneath the willows and face the truth about what really happened to Clara Hale. The locket gleamed under the lamplight, too bright to belong to the dead. I stood there, frozen, staring at it on the vanity where I'd seen it last, buried in the mud. I could still feel the dirt on my fingertips, but now it looked spotless, restored, as if time had reversed itself overnight. Edward turned toward me slowly. "You shouldn't be in here." "I found this," I said, my voice trembling, "at the lake." His expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes flickered, a mix of fear and guilt. "You shouldn't have gone there," he said quietly. "The lake isn't safe." "Safe?" I snapped. "You buried her locket there." He froze. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he whispered, "So you know." I took a step back. "Know what, Edward? What did you do to her?" His eyes softened, a man caught between confession and madness. It wasn't supposed to happen that way. She was ill, fragile. The lake was her refuge. One night she went there and... He swallowed hard. She never came back. "But you buried her locket," I said. "Why hide it if she drowned?" He turned away. "Because I couldn't stand to look at it." "Or because you didn't want anyone to find it," I whispered. His hand tightened on the edge of the vanity, his knuckles white. "You sound just like her," he murmured. "Always asking questions, never letting things rest." "Maybe that's why she screamed," I said before I could stop myself. He spun around, eyes blazing. "You think you can judge me? You think you know what it's like to be haunted every day by someone you couldn't save?" His anger cracked something in me. "No, Edward. I think you're haunted by someone you couldn't control." He stared at me, chest rising and falling, and for a terrifying second I thought he might strike me. But instead he stepped back, shaking his head like a man waking from a dream. "You shouldn't be afraid of me, Evelyn," he said quietly. "It's this house you should fear." Then he left, closing the door gently behind him. I stood there, trembling, the silence pressing down like the weight of the entire house. When I turned back to the vanity, I saw something new. A small envelope tucked behind the mirror. My hands shook as I pulled it free. Inside was a folded letter, yellowed with age. It was written in delicate cursive. "If you're reading this, he's lied to you too." My heart pounded as I unfolded it completely. "My name is Clara Hale. If Edward still lives, know that his grief is not what it seems. He keeps secrets buried deeper than the lake, and one of them is alive. I dropped the letter, my vision swimming. Alive? What did that mean? Tell me. What would you have done if you found a letter like that? Would you have run? Or would curiosity pull you closer to the edge like it did to me? That night I couldn't sleep. I could still feel the house breathing around me, restless and waiting. Near midnight I heard faint footsteps again. But this time they didn't stop at my door. They moved down the hallway toward the stairs that led to the cellar. I followed, my bare feet cold against the wooden floor. The cellar door was slightly open, a lantern glowing below. I descended slowly, the air thick and damp. Edward stood near the far wall, facing a row of covered shapes, 3 wooden crates stacked against the stone. He knelt and lifted one lid, reaching inside. I gasped. Inside wasn't tools or belongings. It was fabric, dresses, women's dresses, different sizes, colors, and ages, and on the top of the pile lay another red rose. Take a second to like and subscribe, and press the bell icon to stay with me for more stories like this one. My voice caught in my throat as he turned and saw me standing there. "Evelyn," he said softly, "you weren't supposed to see this. Don't miss the next part, where I uncover the meaning behind the dresses in the cellar and the truth that shatters everything I thought I knew about Edward Hale." For a long moment, neither of us moved. Edward stood in the cellar's dim light, the lantern's flame flickering over his face. I could see the veins in his neck, the tremor in his hands. The rows of crates loomed behind him like silent witnesses, their contents half hidden beneath torn linen. "Evelyn," he said quietly, "you shouldn't be here." I couldn't speak. My eyes drifted to the open crate again. Those dresses, delicate and faded, neatly folded as if they belonged to someone still waiting to wear them. "What is this?" I whispered. "Why are these here?" He took a step forward. "They're memories. That's all? Memories?" I said, my voice trembling. "Edward, there are dozens of them." He stopped, jaw tightening. "I couldn't throw them away. Each belonged to someone He hesitated. "Someone I couldn't save." "Someone you couldn't save?" I echoed. "Or someone who didn't survive this house?" His eyes darkened. "You don't understand." "Then help me understand," I pleaded, "because right now it looks like you're collecting ghosts." He turned away, shoulders heavy. Every woman who lived here, she heard it too. The voice, the whispers. The house does something to people. I shook my head. "You're blaming the house?" His voice cracked. "You think I don't know how it sounds? But Clara wasn't the first. There were others before her. This place changes people, Evelyn. It feeds on grief." For a second I saw it, real fear behind his eyes. Not madness, not guilt, fear. He moved toward me slowly, hands outstretched. "Please," he said softly. "Let me explain everything tomorrow. You need to rest." But I couldn't move. My eyes fell on one dress near the bottom of the pile, a pale yellow one with small embroidered daisies. I recognized it instantly. It was mine. My breath caught. "Edward," I whispered, stepping back. "Why is my dress here?" He froze. The flickering lantern cast shadows across his face, turning his expression unreadable. "That's not yours." "It is," I said. "I wore it the day I came here." "Evelyn," he said sharply. "Stop!" I took another step back, my heart racing. "What are you planning to do to me?" "Nothing," he snapped, then softer. "I swear, nothing. You have to trust me." "I can't," I said, my voice breaking. "Not after everything I've seen." He stared at me for a long, unbearable moment. Then, in a low voice, he said, "You sound just like her." "Clara?" He didn't answer. "Tell me, if you found proof that you were becoming part of someone else's tragedy, would you stay to hear the truth? Or would you run before it was too late?" Before I could decide, Mrs. Whitmore's voice echoed faintly from above. "Mr. Hale? Dinner's ready." Edward's expression softened. "Go upstairs," he said. "Please." I hesitated, then ran. I didn't stop until I reached my room and locked the door behind me. My hands were still shaking. I could smell the faint scent of roses on my clothes, the same scent that lingered in Clara's room. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the letter I'd hidden beneath my pillow. He keeps secrets buried deeper than the lake, and one of them is alive. Alive. What if Clara wasn't dead? What if she was still here, trapped somewhere in this house, calling out for help through the walls? That night I heard it again. A faint humming from below the floorboards, soft and sorrowful, like a lullaby. I pressed my ear against the wooden planks. The sound grew louder, closer, until it formed words. Evelyn, find me. Take a second to like and subscribe, and press the bell icon to stay with me for more stories like this one. The next morning I followed the voice, and found a hidden door behind the cellar wall that changed everything I believed about Edward Hale. Don't miss the next part, where I discover what lies behind that wall, and who's been whispering my name all along. Morning light crept across the floorboards, but I barely felt its warmth. The voice from last night still echoed in my mind, soft, broken, pleading. Evelyn, find me! I knew it wasn't my imagination anymore. I'd heard footsteps, seen signs, felt her presence. Clara Hale wasn't gone, not entirely. And if she wanted to be found, I was going to find her. After Edward left for town that morning, I went down to the cellar. The smell of damp earth and old wood filled the air. My heart pounded as I moved the lantern along the stone walls, searching for anything unusual. Then I saw it. A small seam where two stones didn't quite meet. A faint draft slipped through. I pressed my fingers to it and the stone shifted. Behind it was a wooden door, small and hidden, almost part of the wall. My breath caught. I pulled the handle and it opened with a long, painful groan. The air inside was cold and still. I lifted the lantern higher and stepped through. The hidden room was small, barely more than a cellar within a cellar. Dust hung in the air like mist. Against the far wall stood a wooden chair, a torn shawl draped across it, and on the floor beneath the chair lay a pair of shoes. Muddy, delicate, and unmistakably feminine. Clara's shoes. I knelt beside them, my hands shaking. Something shimmered beneath the dust. An old journal, its leather cover cracked and worn. I opened it carefully. The handwriting was faint but elegant. If anyone finds this, please know. I am not mad. He says the house speaks to me, but it isn't the house. It's her. The one before me. Before her. My heart pounded harder. There was another woman before Clara. I turned the page. He keeps us here. Not out of cruelty, but obsession. He says he loves us, yet he locks us away when we stop becoming what he remembers. I hear her crying in the walls at night, and sometimes I see my own face in her mirror. I froze. The handwriting trailed off, ending mid-sentence. The last word was blurred by a drop of ink, or maybe a tear. Tell me honestly, if you were standing in that room, reading the diary of a dead woman, would you have run or kept reading? Because I couldn't stop. I had to know how far Edward's darkness reached. The door behind me creaked. I turned sharply, heart in my throat. Evelyn! Edward stood in the doorway, his face hidden in shadow. Why do you keep coming down here? He asked quietly. I heard her, I said. Clara, she's still here. He stepped closer, his expression unreadable. You shouldn't have found this place. What did you do to her, Edward? His hands clenched. I tried to save her. By locking her away? He shook his head violently. You don't understand. This house, it does things. It takes what you love and twists it. I thought if I kept her close, if I could stop the voices. He stopped mid-sentence, eyes darting to the wall. Do you hear that? A faint whisper drifted through the cracks of the stones. A woman's voice, fragile but clear. You promised me forever. Edward's face went white. Clara! He dropped the lantern. The flame flickered, then died, plunging us into darkness. Edward! I shouted. Stop, what are you doing? But his voice broke through the black. She won't let me go. She never will. Suddenly I felt his hand grip mine. Evelyn, he whispered, you need to leave this house before she takes you too. The whispering grew louder, echoing from every direction, surrounding us in a cold, endless chorus. Find me. Stay with me. Forever. Take a second to like and subscribe, and press the bell icon to stay with me for more stories like this one. The last thing I saw before the lantern went out completely was Clara's shoes shifting on the floor, like someone unseen was wearing them again. Don't miss the next part, the final chapter, where I uncover the full truth about Edward Hale, Clara's death, and the secret that binds them both to this house forever. The cellar plunged into darkness, but the whispers didn't stop. They grew louder, closer, until I could almost feel them breathing against my skin. Stay with me. Forever. Edward. I shouted, trying to find him in the blackness. The air felt thick, heavy with cold and memory. The lantern rolled somewhere across the floor, its faint glow flickering back to life for a second. Just enough for me to see him. Edward was on his knees beside the wall, his fingers digging into the stone. She's here, he whispered hoarsely. I buried her right here. I thought it would keep her quiet. My heart pounded. You buried her here? He looked up at me, his eyes wild, wet with tears. She begged me not to leave her alone. I didn't kill her, Evelyn. I couldn't save her. She fell. She hit her head on the rocks by the lake. I tried to bring her home, but by the time I did, his voice broke. She was gone. I thought if I laid her to rest here, she'd forgive me. I covered my mouth, trembling. And the others? He shook his head, desperate. No others. Just Clara. But this house, it remembers. It made me see her in every face. I thought if I could keep you here, maybe it would finally stop showing me her. I stepped back slowly, the weight of his words pressing against my chest. You kept me here because you thought I could replace her. Tears rolled down his face. You sounded like her. You looked like her. I didn't mean to. The whisper cut through him like wind through leaves. Liar! A cold gust swept through the cellar, extinguishing the last of the light. I screamed as the room shook. Dust rained from the ceiling, and the stones beneath us groaned like something was waking beneath them. Edward turned toward the voice, arms outstretched. Clara, please! The whisper grew louder, angry now. You promised me forever. Then, through the trembling lantern light, I saw it. A faint silhouette forming in the doorway. A woman's shape, her hair floating like smoke, her eyes hollow and endless. Edward dropped to his knees, sobbing. I'm sorry. The air around us grew icy. I could see my breath. The figure stepped closer, her hand reaching toward him. Tell me honestly, if you'd seen what I saw, would you have run, or stayed to witness what love and guilt can become? I couldn't move. All I could do was watch as Edward whispered, Take me, but leave her. The ghost's pale hand brushed his cheek. His breath hitched. Then he slumped forward, silent, his body still. The cellar went quiet. The ghost turned toward me. For one long agonizing moment, her hollow eyes met mine, and then she whispered, Thank you. The light flared, and she was gone. I stood there shaking, the silence deafening. When I finally stumbled out of the cellar, dawn was breaking over the hills. The air outside felt new, clean, free. The sheriff found Edward's body later that day, sitting peacefully by the wall. They said it looked like his heart just gave out. I didn't tell them about the whispers or the ghost. Some things don't belong in the world of the living. I left Maple Hollow that evening, carrying Clara's journal and the locket with me. I buried them both under a willow tree far from that cursed house. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of silence. Because silence isn't always empty. Sometimes, it's what sets you free. Take a second to like and subscribe, and press the bell icon to stay with me for more stories like this one. When I think about Edward Hale now, I don't feel hatred. I feel pity. His love became a prison, his grief a curse that haunted everyone who entered that house. And maybe that's the lesson. When you try to hold on to what's gone, you lose what's still alive. So tell me, would you have stayed to set her free? Or walked away and let the dead keep their secrets? Don't miss the next story, where another voice from the past reminds us that some truths refuse to stay buried. Sometimes life takes turns we never expect. Every person in this story carried their own pain, their own choices, and their own consequences. Maybe you saw yourself in one of them. Or maybe it reminded you of someone you once knew. What do you think happened next? What would you have done if you were in their place? If you have any questions about what happened to the other characters, or if you want me to share more about them, just comment below. I read every message you leave, and your thoughts truly mean a lot to me. And if this story touched your heart, inspired you, or even made you think differently, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps me keep sharing stories that move people, open minds, and remind us we're all human at the end of the day. Your support keeps these stories alive. Thank you for watching, for feeling, and for being part of this journey. More powerful stories are coming soon. Stay tuned and stay kind.